the government also created a policy that drew red lines around neighborhoods of color. It's called redlining. Now, we think redlining came from the banking industry or the insurance industry. No. Redlining originated with the FHA. Redlining originated by our government, right? And as a result of that redlining, lots of white GIs, plumbers, electricians, bought houses. They bought houses in the 40s and 50s, right? They had children. Those children have had children. That asset, that simple asset that was facilitated directly by the federal government and its policies and excluded people of color, results in the wealth gap we have today, right? And in fact, is the greatest argument for the need for affirmative action in higher education. Because what do people spend their money on? Their children's education. So for every generation that has come since World War II, and then you can pile on top of that, predatory lending that kind of decimated communities, and you kind of have a sense. So again, I'm getting back to the kind of informatics piece. I do think that we have to try to think about the ways that the limits. I don't think we can be overly optimistic, but a lot of this has to do with knowledge, right? One person in the room knows about redlining, right? We need to kind of be able to mobilize and create and spread that knowledge well beyond such that, people start to think about the array of institutions. So people can't get away with this argument that, we've arrived here because we have, because of who's in the White House. I hope that during the course of these next 2 days, that there's a piece of the work that's done here that helps think about how to do that. I don't know, but I think to the extent that that's what we're here for, that would be a great outcome.
Yes. I would say that I see some of this. Can you stand? I see some of the new media, especially the social media, as almost a haven for people to be able to promulgate, racist, sexist, homophobic speech. It's like a really uncivil discourse. And part of it is because people can do it anonymously, even where they can't. People somehow feel, there's this distance. They're not having to face people face to face, and then they say they do it in the name of free speech. And I think that that's a really disturbing aspect of all this.
Did everyone hear?
Did you go ahead and rephrase it?
No, they heard it.
Everybody
you
heard
said it.
It just very briefly was that there are so many sites that are, if you will, boutique sites that are, they're hate sites, there are sites on all sides of the issues, but there are certainly sites that promote hate speech and other things, and the question about whether or not we want to protect those people and those sites. You're asked, to me, I'm a First Amendment proponent, so I believe that those sites have to have the right to exist so that we have the right to refute them and to try to make big changes in our culture. But, that is coming from the media and coming from a position of needing to have that First Amendment right, which seems to be one of the core values that you mentioned in the United Nations talk about the human rights that are being guarded on an international basis, really is that freedom of speech.
And I should say that, on the case that we're discussing, on the Troy Davis case, it was almost universally in support of him. And it still didn't, so, I think you're absolutely right. It is really a very scary aspect of this. But, I think the point is that, there are such extreme limits to how effective it is in the first place. But as that old cartoon, that old greeting card said, with the two dogs, are sitting at the computer, and, and one says to the other, on the computer, nobody knows you're a dog, right? And unfortunately, that's true.
Well, I think it's the narrative itself that has to shift, that the technologies, one of the sources that we use for our paper is George Parkin Grant and his book, English Speaking Justice, which talks about the Enlightenment and some of the assumptions at work. And one of them was an assumption related to the technologies and how the technologies would kind of advance the agenda. But the agenda was not advanced equitably. It wasn't advanced coherently. And ultimately, that's what's going to make the difference. I wasn't always like this. I just want people to know that. When I wrote my book, Zen and the Art of Rhetoric, and when I wrote my first Rhetoric of Racism, I was very, very hopeful and really believed that, a new discourse would transform the material and institutional realities of race. I really believe that. I believe that less just because I've seen how even that type of discourse is often just ignored. So I don't think you can change what's in Bill Guillory is a good friend of mine. He's a diversity consultant, a professor of chemistry, and he says there are 3 boxes. First box is attitudes, beliefs, and values. The second box is strategies and techniques and material things. And the third box is transformation. We want to get to the third box, which is transformation. That's where everybody wants to get. We put all of our energy in the second box, but it's this box that's going to determine our getting to that box. And so I would just say that as long as the discourse on human rights is as incoherent as it is in the West, and it is fundamentally incoherent in the West, we rant and rave and assassinate Saddam Hussein and forget who put Saddam Hussein in power. And we have found a way to rationalize and justify that as okay and in the name of human rights, and that's a fundamental moral incoherence. And we all know it in our hearts. I think we know it in our heads too. We just don't want to challenge it because we gain privileges from that, and people don't give up privileges. I'm sorry if I really have, I'm really not this bad most of the time, folks.
I appreciate the question, and I do think there is a big digital divide, and yet I am very hopeful. I realize that, I'm the curly hair over here, but I think that what we have the opportunity to do with new media is transform media itself. And I believe that the stories, the narratives that have been told in traditional media have been negative and need to be transformed, and we are the ones to transform it.
So, I would simply say that I'll say it. When I first got into this Troy Davis work and I first started this, actually this line of thinking, I was asked to come to the Kirwan Institute to give a presentation to try to think about new ways to start a conversation about race. And my whole point was to start that conversation about race, talking about white people being privileged as victims, right? And to talk so that people of color who have felt that for years and years and years, for whom those, and I don't really care how old they are, those slides of the lynchings, in a way, are as much a part of our DNA as anything. And the idea was that by doing that, people of color would start to begin to be able to change the narrative, to take control to some degree, and start to advocate in ways that were true and consistent with their actual experience. Again, I have to tell you, when Troy Davis was executed, I started to move over onto Mark's side on this, and I started to become less optimistic. However, in this setting, when we're talking about how to use this, my initial response would be, well, we need to worry about the content, right? The narrative has to do, how do we worry about what's out there? But I share some of Rachel's optimism. I think, there is the potential to kind of reach that transformative stage, but I don't think we know how yet, and that's what's going to take our work.
I have one, I guess, positive thing to say. If there's anything that's going to change this, it's empathy. And that's not sympathy. And, it is fundamentally connecting with each other as human beings. And much of that over the course of our lives is educated out of us. So finding ways to cultivate that and to reaffirm that and embody it and model it, that's where the differences will be made.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all.